Hey all, today we're going to do a little bit of work with the selection tools. It's this top set of tools here in Photoshop. We're going to work with selections, cutting and pasting images, doing very basic things in Photoshop like creating a new document, combining two images, changing the hue and color balance, looking at brightness and contrast, and trying to do some basic photo blending. So here we go. I'm going to show you how you can do some basic drag and drop just to start. In Photoshop, let's say I've found this image is from Wikipedia of the Statue of Liberty, drop it into Photoshop, and you'll see that I have a layer there with the background lock layer of the image. Typically I don't like to work on that layer, so I'll duplicate that and I can just turn the background layer off. Now you can see if both layers are turned off, you get this kind of nice checkerboard which says, hey, nothing's there. Turning layers on and off just makes them visible or invisible, and you do that by clicking this little space where the eyeball rests there. Now my objective today is to do something really quick and simple, and I'm going to do that by using the selection tools. I want to remove the sky in this picture. So here's the rectangle select tool. I can select and you can see these kind of like ants marching, little dashed line of checkerboarding black and white. You can hold the shift key and add to the selection, or you can hold the alt key and remove the selection. You can press delete and that will erase whatever is selected. I'm going to press Control Z and back out of that, and Control Alt Z to back out even further. And I can have this selection. I can right click the selection, I can inverse that selection and delete everything that's not selected there. I can right click, I can feather the edge of the selection and decide how much I'd like to feather that edge, so that when I delete it I get a nice foggy transition in the deleted area. I can right click again and I can refine the edge, which gives me even more detail with what I can do, or more, I guess, more options with how I manipulate what is going on with that edge. And I like the little preview palette that lets me use these scrubbers, little sliders, and see the actual live results right there. So selection tools, pretty cool. If you're going to get rid of a big area like this in the background, you could go about it by just using the selection tool and grabbing, holding the shift key to keep adding to the selection. You could even long press here on the rectangle tool and get the elliptical selection tool. They call it the marquee tool. And you can just add to or subtract from selections to your heart's content. This is great for some things, but not good for this particular job. It would be a real pain in the butt to get all of the detail around the Statue of Liberty with these big selection devices. So there are other options. Here's the magic wand tool, which you can use to select a more free-form shape. For those of you with tablets, this is pretty nice because you can, without having to have too much dexterity, you can kind of carefully work your way around more complex shapes and make exactly the selection you like. You could zoom in with Control plus, or you can use the Alt key and the scroll wheel to zoom in into a particular area. So there's a lot of ways to move around in Photoshop if you're new to it. Control plus and minus on the keyboard are just really nice ways to zoom in and out. So you could do that. And that would be a little bit labor intensive, but you could definitely make that work. The polygon lasso tool is great also, but works in a very different way. It's going to select by clicking. Every time you click, it's going to create a line between the last two clicks. So every time you click your mouse or your tablet to its surface, it'll create a path between the 2 points. It's pretty easy to control, and as you close the shape you get a selected area. You can press delete and get rid of that if you like. The magnetic lasso tool is sort of autopilot for the lasso selection tools. You can still click to help it find the edge you want it to find, but it has a pretty good, the software does a pretty good job of finding any area of contrast. Here, the contrast between this color and value of the sky and that of the statue. So you can kind of work your way around, and it'll do a pretty good job. It will get confused though, and you might have to do some refinement. Especially you can see some of the confusion it has around the tines of the headdress or the crown or whatever you want to call it on the statue. As you work your way around, you get all the way around, and you would close the shape either with a double click, or you would close the shape just by bringing that all the way back to its origin. One thing you might find is if you get a little frustrated or a little lost, it'll get this kind of ridiculous feeling of feeling trapped as you can't get out of it. If you ever get stuck in this mode and you just feel like you want to die, double click and that should resolve all your issues. Simply press Ctrl Z, get rid of the horrible selection mess that you just made. So yeah, if you ever get into trouble, just simply double click, Ctrl Z, or edit, undo back here. So that's how that works. The other set of tools in our bag of tricks is going to be the quick selection tool, which, as you can see, quickly selected that background area. I'm going to hold shift again and add to that quick selection and just work my way down. This is a really good way to get most of the sky selected. I like it a lot. But for today, I'm going to use the magic wand tool, and I am going to just click the background and get most of what I want with simply one click. So I like that. I like that even better than the quick select tool. I'm going to hold the shift key again and select these two little pieces of sky that did not get included, and look down here and see that I have some chunks of sky that are not selected already. So here's where I'm going to go back to that first tool and just holding shift, I'm going to use the rectangle selection tool and just grab chunks of sky that haven't been included, and I'm all done. Double check that I don't have anything essential that's been selected on accident. Hold shift and get this little chunk of the sky right here, and then I've got everything I need. I'm going to simply hit delete and I'm there. Looking good. Control 0 is going to recenter my frame, and I use the rectangle select tool to simply click out of the selected area, but if you didn't want to do that, you could go to select deselect, or Control D would do the same thing. So now we have no sky and it looks good. I'm going to go back to the Wikipedia for my reference and simply drag this new reference into the scene. You'll see that there are control anchor, like kind of anchor points or control points on the corners and right at the middle point of each horizontal and vertical axis of the outside border. You'll see also this X-like frame that crosses the image. What this means is the computer, the software is waiting for you to finalize the placement, size, and scale and placement of the image. What I'm doing is holding the shift key to keep the image in proportion so that no matter where my mouse goes, it's going to try and track the enlargement or reduction in size in proportion, both vertical and horizontal, so it stays with a proper ratio. This way you're not going to get distorted images that squish and stretch like that. So I'm just going to hold shift, keep it in proportion, stretch it out to the maximum size, and then I'm just going to drag that shape or that layer. You can drag layers back and forth over here in the layers palette just by pulling it down. You can see that there'll be a little bolded line when it knows that it's in transition to a new layer. You can see that bolded line right there. So now I have a sunset behind my statue, and it doesn't look very good at all, but let's work a little bit on making it look better. I'm going to hit Control T. I just zoomed out with Control minus again, and because the perspective of the picture of the statue is from sort of a below the statue vantage point, you can see that the perspective lines, I'm going to make a new layer here, and I can do that by clicking this little icon. Let me grab kind of a bright blue color to show you what I'm talking about. You can see if I drew a line from here to here, you would see it follows the perspective line of the Statue of Liberty. You drag this in front of the statue so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. I'm missing it just a little bit, but the basic idea is there, is the perspective is sort of like this. And that means that these perspective lines, which are drawing from the statue and then down toward the horizon line, mean that, let me just delete this layer by selecting it here and pressing delete, mean that the sunset can't be the horizon line in the sunset image can't be up here because that would be at odds with the horizon line that you see in the image. Even down here, these horizon lines are still pointing downward slightly. So I need to drag the horizon of the background image down below so I don't really see where the Earth meets the sky, so to speak. And I can do that with Control T. I can keep enlarging the sky as big as I want to, and I simply hit Enter to finalize the transformation. So I'm going to do it there. As you noticed, I'm using this tool up here to sort of move around any selected layer or any active layer, and I can do that at my will. Again, Control Z for undo. I like this little portion of the sky with some of this hot sort of yellow peeking through. I still get these nice lavenders up here. So I like that, and I like the statue, and everything's cut out really nicely. But now I need to do a little color correction, so I'm going to go to Image and then Adjustments. From here, there's some simple things we can do. Let's just go to Hue and Saturation right off the bat. I can take the lightness down. We know that if the sun is setting behind an object, that the object itself is going to be in shadow. The original image was in an overcast scene, very gray sky, no direct lighting. But it was midday as opposed to this image, so I'm going to darken the overall value of the lightness of the image quite a bit. Let's just stop right there, for example. And then I'm going to leave, I guess I'm going to play with this just to show you. Hue and Saturation can do a lot of oddball things with the color in your picture. So in this particular transformation, I'm not going to, or photo blend, I'm not going to mess with it very much. Not my favorite way of approaching it, but the lightness is cool, helps out a lot. Let's go Image Adjustments again. Another way you could have gone at it is exposure. Exposure is a really great solution for situations like this, and I can even utilize it to a greater degree to darken what I already have. Say OK. There are a couple other tools there which you can explore if you want to. That was gamma and offset. But I think for what my purpose is, the exposure works great. Color balance is the next thing I want to show you. You can set the shadows, midtones, or highlights for what you want to manipulate. And in this case, let's go for shadows. And what I'd like to do is add some red to the statue. I'd like to add a little bit of yellow and a little bit of violet or lavender. And you can see that it's a pretty dramatic effect. If I say OK, I can press Control Z and bounce back and forth between my two, the original, and this is the original, and then the edited. And I've just kind of cast the whole layer in this sort of orangish with a little bit of purple tone, and it gives it a lot of that reflected light from what the sky would be bouncing down into the statue. So as it is, I feel pretty good about it. You could call that good. And then with just a couple basic steps here, you can use selection tools to delete a sky. You can use the image adjustment tools to change the warmth and color of the statue, and also the brightness and contrast. And with those few tools, you can do a lot of work in a very short amount of time. And I think it's a pretty exciting and encouraging step for first-time Photoshoppers to be able to just do a simple photo blend. So that's what this is a kind of a first-step project just to get a little confidence, get familiar with selection tools, get familiar with the layers palette, and then also get familiar with what happens here under the Image tab, where you can play with adjustments and just start to get a little bit of exposure to the ton of options that you have here. And like I said, I might have some preferences of how I want to get this particular task done, but that doesn't mean it's the only way or even the best way. There are tons of ways to do this basic photo blend, and so this is just one of them. And as you gain more comfort and familiarity with Photoshop, you'll find that there's a lot of great ways to do any job. So that's just a good first step for you guys, and hope you enjoyed it. What I'd like to show you next is, right before we finish up here, I'm just going to create a new layer and just show you a couple more things. I'm going to use the paint bucket tool, which is typically kind of hiding right under the gradient tool, so you can long press on the gradient tool, which looks like this, and grab the paint bucket. And I am going to actually, let's go back to the gradient tool. And I'm just going to draw a line with the gradient tool selected, and I have this kind of blue to white transition. You can grab from any of these presets, and you can load a bunch more presets, but this blue one, not too bad. Let's see what happens here. I'm going to invert what I had, and then I'm going to play with these transfer modes, which are pretty sweet. I can multiply it. I'm just going to use the arrow keys to toggle color or linear burn, color dodge, darker color, lighten, screen. You see all of these options. They're just different ways of the color blending into the color of one layer blending into the colors of the layers below it. And this is kind of a cool way to finalize a photo blend. You can use it in something like a gradient, which is going to be a pretty dramatic solution, but it doesn't always have to be. You can always take the opacity of that layer and really dip it down, and you can see that here I'm using what's called divide as the translation of the color of all the layers beneath me, and or beneath this gradient layer, sorry. And here I'm at like only 9%. But what I like is if I take it off, you see it creates this sort of like warm haze, giving the picture a little more atmosphere, and that atmosphere acts as a unifying element in the picture, making that statue feel a little more in the scene than it was without it. Now let me take one more step to kind of sell the illusion a little more. I'm just going to go to Google, and I'm going to search for paper texture, and you'll see that there's just a ton of options. I'm going to make sure and use, let's see, let me go back. Just kind of a larger paper texture, good high resolution, and I'm just going to paste that in, hit Control T, and this time holding Shift I can transfer or translate this around its axis at I think 15-degree increments. Yeah, 15-degree increments. If I don't hold Shift, I can get it, you know, anywhere in between 0 and 360 degrees, but if I hold Shift I can get kind of a perfect rotation around 15-degree increments. And then I can, with that layer, I can do that transfer mode thing again, and then let me zoom in so you can see a little better what's going on. Here you can see the paper texture and its grain overlaid on top, or kind of burned into the other images or layers below it. Here you can see what darken does, multiply, pull up here, so you can see what's going on. So let's say we just use soft light and take this to about 50%. You can see the without and the with, and it may or may not be a good idea in this particular case, but it's just kind of cool to see how you can add a little bit of texture to the image. That'll give it a little different feel depending on what you're trying to go for. So yeah, that's some basics in Photoshop blending different layers, cutting out parts of one image so that other parts of another image show through. And I think that's about all we're going to do with this video, so thanks for watching.